Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Connected Brains with me, your host Saurav Bhatia. I have a very special guest today, and we're looking to find out more about him, what he's done, what his journey has been. But before I bring him on, a few disclaimers. This is just me in my personal capacity. This is not investment advice. This is purely for entertainment and educational purposes. Before you take any decisions on this, make sure to do your own research. And with that, let me bring in our special guest today. His name is Rohith, and instead of me telling you about him, let him speak a little about what he's been up to and who he is.
Well, obviously, I can't hide anything from you, Saurav, since we've known each other for 2 decades now. But I guess the best way I would like to maybe describe myself is I've been a fintech entrepreneur for a few years now. I've also done corporate jobs. So I've seen both sides of the, field. I am a father of 3 kids, and yeah, I've grown up and lived in various parts of the world. I've lived in Eastern Europe, studied in Singapore. I was born in India, so I consider myself a little bit of like a nomad myself. But yeah, Singapore is otherwise home.
Awesome. So it's good to have you here, Rohith, and looking forward to an interesting session with you today. So I know you've been into crypto and Bitcoin for a while. So let me ask you the first question. What's your journey been? How do you get started? And just how do you get here?
It's interesting because actually, when I look back, the first time I probably heard anything around cryptocurrency was when I was in Romania. So it was 2014. I think it was at a party when I met this guy, and he kept talking about mining, and he just went on and on about mining, and I had no idea what he was talking about. And interestingly, only like I guess last year when I picked up a book about Ethereum and the story of Ethereum, there's this whole mining activity that happened in Romania. In fact, the co-founding team, one of the guys is Romanian. So in hindsight, I probably missed out on an opportunity then when they were actually mining the first blocks for Ethereum. But that was when I heard first about mining and cryptocurrency. But I guess when I read the Satoshi paper for the very first time, it was probably around 2016 is when I actually read the paper for the first time, seriously. And then I started trying to understand blockchain. So I picked up a book called Blockchain Fundamentals. Very good book. We can, at the end of the show, we can have the links of all the books. So I sat and read that. It was the first time. It was cryptography. It was hashing. It was Merkle tree, and with whatever little computer engineering that's still left in me, I was trying to grasp the subject. and yeah, I found it fascinating, but I never understood what the use case was. So I got what they were trying to do. I found it super innovative. But then I never understood what the use cases were. I thought it was again a solution looking for a problem, and then the optics and visuals and everything was around. It's used for drugs, buying drugs, and all that saga that happened, and obviously the price going up and down. So I maybe paid attention, never took it seriously, never really thought I might need Bitcoin. But everything changed during the pandemic. That's when I really started taking crypto seriously, because I started seeing something around me that I couldn't reconcile in my head. When you think about what happened during the pandemic, because it was a shock, right? I mean, none of us have been through something like this ever in our life, that you had everything around you shut down, society is shut down, restaurants are shut down, general life is shut down. I was, at that point in time, I was running a startup, and I was really worried about what's going to happen to us, our livelihood, if everything is going to get shut down. So, I had that uppermost in my head. And what I saw was money getting printed left and right. I heard about the fact that even in US, that printed, I think, about $3 trillion odd dollars. They had not printed so much in the last 200 years. stock market went down and then it went up and it had the best ever rally since 1938. So there was this whole dichotomy in my head that on one side people are losing jobs and lives, there's a growing social unrest, uncertainty, Wall Street is going up and going up. And I was like, I don't get it. There is something that I don't understand here. And I guess that's when I went into the rabbit hole of what actually money is and the history of money, and what is it that we're using today, inflation, debasing of the currency, quantitative easing, and I just started going more and more into trying to understand what actually money is. And at the same time, when I went and read the Satoshi paper back again and then started reading a lot more about Bitcoin and everything else it was standing for, I started getting more clarity and conviction around what actually the use case was. And that's when I started slowly started actively taking a position in cryptocurrencies, both from investment perspective for sure, but also in terms of the technology itself.
Nice. Thank you. I think it's been an interesting journey for you. Maybe I should call you a closet Bitcoin maximalist who kind of has been watching this space for a while, has been seeing what it could do, or and kind of forming a view over time. And maybe this is the moment where you said, I have bought Bitcoin, right? And you were, I guess, like this guy dancing it out there, showing everybody your moves and seeing how that plays out.
It wasn't one Bitcoin, obviously, but I can tell you that it was amazing that when I bought it, I was like so nervous because the first time, I actually went in and purchased it, and then in a few weeks it went up, and I was like, wow, this thing is real. This is actually an asset that is volatile and can go up and down.
And right after that, after you felt happy about it for like 10 seconds, it went down and kept going down till it went past what you'd bought it for. And then a bit more and a bit more. But that's the story of Bitcoin. But I think just unpacking a few things. So let me ask you a very obvious question. Since you said you were reading that paper, are you Satoshi?
I think
Hopefully
Saurav,
not, right?
you are one person who knows my programming skills so well that you would know I would never be able to implement something as innovative and good as this. So no, as much as I was very much into Japanese culture, because Satoshi seems to be a Japanese name, around that time when the paper was written, but no, I'm not Satoshi.
Which is good. Otherwise, the world would be looking at the wrong kind of person at this point, I guess. But as you read the Satoshi paper, right? Like for me, Bitcoin's more than just technology. I think, and I was having dinner with somebody and we were discussing how it's an interesting piece of technology, but it's also a lot in terms of behavioral theory applied to people and gaming and so game theory, behavioral theory, economics, all of that packaged into a piece of code that people have out there. So I guess as you read Satoshi's paper, what was it that came to you, as something that you can kind of share with people across how you thought of it?
It's amazing because it's whoever's written it. I think the first thing is that it's a pseudonymous author, and the mystery around the fact that there's no CEO, there's no leader, there's no founder in itself makes it fascinating, right? And that is something that I think has also, to a large extent, made Bitcoin very different from every other cryptocurrency that has come in after that. But when I read it the first time, I thought it was just pure peer-to-peer cash. So I thought I'm going to be buying coffee with Bitcoin, but I really didn't see the need for it because I said, look, okay, now when you think of it, you have pretty much you can do peer-to-peer, right? It's not like it's a problem, at least in Singapore and many of the markets you can. So when I read the first time, I thought it was peer-to-peer. Interestingly, when I read it the second time, there's this whole concept around privacy where he does touch upon it. And when you think about it, the whole NSA saga happened 5-6 years after that. So it was a very prescient paper even in that sense, though he doesn't spend so much time around it. So, but he does talk about the importance of not collecting data from from customers and not sort of abusing it, right? Which was interesting when you read that part of the paper. But I guess what came out pretty clear is he had an issue with the current monetary system, and he was clearly trying to come up with a new monetary system. And I think when I started looking at it through that lens, then I started understanding, what Bitcoin actually could evolve and become beyond just one of the most secure networks that we've built, beyond a peer-to-peer sort of network. It then started making more sense. Of course, he didn't unpack all of this in a paper, in the first paper, but I guess he left enough hints that he was probably also thinking in terms of it not just being purely a medium of exchange or peer-to-peer sort of cash or currency.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? For me, when I think about Bitcoin and its use cases, there are like a handful which come to mind, right? So, of course, it's a payment capability, but given the speed of the block, which is like 10 minutes, and the cost of processing it, it's not that efficient as a peer-to-peer payment construct. But interestingly, very few people realize it, but the actual Bitcoin technology is also changing, and they're introducing something called a Lightning Network, which sits on top of it, which could achieve that peer-to-peer capability. But I think it's also like a great store of value. It's also a good settlement, like a global settlement network capability. I think today, again, very few people recognize that international banks or financial institutions take many days to settle payments.
Exactly.
And the collateral they need and the payment mechanism many times is not even like, it's not even gross settlement, it's like net settlement. So when you dig into those use cases, Bitcoin potentially has quite a few areas where it can develop on. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, a very good book is, and I think you and I had spoken about it. It's a book called Layered Money by Nick Bhatia. In no way is related to you, and you confirmed it. So it's a very, very interesting book.
It could
But
have been my pseudonym.
it could have been your pseudonym.
I
So
have many since I
I
adopted the
wanted to check.
Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the first question I asked you. Is this you or related to you? But it's a fascinating book because he talks about the evolution of money and how money has actually evolved in layers. And to the point that you mentioned, obviously the first layer was gold, and everything else was built on top of that, right? And today, even the money that we operate in is I think the third or the fourth layer. To your point, it's not the settlement layer, and it's definitely not the layer that what we call T-bills and so on. So in that sense, our understanding of money is at a much higher level. That what Bitcoin is actually trying to replace in many sense is that first layer of money, which used to be gold and is no longer gold right now. And you're absolutely right that it is all about settlement. So there's another guy called Nick Carter who's written a really nice blog article called, I think it's the settlement assurance idiot or something, or stupid or something. It's a very nice article he's written where he just generally talks about a few points that you mentioned about the cost and the time and how a lot of that settlement, the settlement transactions today are not as effective as possible. So you're absolutely right that when you start really understanding even the evolution of money, you'll realize that Bitcoin is not trying to operate at its current protocol at the layer in which we today transact with money. And that's the layer we don't understand, and that's the layer we don't deal with. We used to, when we were only in a gold settlement layer, when people used to actually go back and exchange for gold, with gold sort of denominated currencies. But we've come a long way since then, and today you can't even go and actually redeem gold. I mean, even that no longer exists today.
That's true, right? Like, and it's interesting to think about money and gold and some of these standards over a period of time. I think the gold standard, gold as a medium of exchange has existed for a very, very long time. And I think it goes back to almost the Roman Empire, when some of those standardized coins were minted and stuff like that. So it lasted a while. I think, interesting thing would be, in the technological era, could Bitcoin evolve into that gold-like construct again?
Yeah.
Something has value only because people think it does. And people who don't believe in it can argue this point for years, months, decades. But that leads me to my next question, actually, which is, when it comes to Bitcoin, whose opinion matters to you?
Look, one of the things I really try and approach any topic, and it's just not related to Bitcoin or Ethereum, but any particular topic, is I try and get both sides of the argument. So even though I'm an engineer by background, I like to think through like a lawyer, because that's what lawyers do, right? That's what law students do. They try and look at it from the defendant's point of view, and also the other side. So I always try and get a balanced view, and that helps me. So even when I look at opinions, of course, there are quite a few people who have personally made very significant positions in Bitcoin. And I think they have skin in the game, right? They're not talking purely by saying, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. So an example is the MicroStrategy CEO, Michael Saylor. He was one of the big first people who took a position in Bitcoin in terms of even, what he did with his company's sort of balance sheet. And Michael Saylor has spoken a lot about Bitcoin, but I really like his view of things, because has the clarity of why he even made such a bold move, given that he was one of the most he was one of those companies during that time that didn't have the valuation like tech companies, but had a lot of cash reserves. But he made that bold move. So I think that matters to me. That I follow Michael Saylor, but I also like to really listen to some of the original. I guess the CryptoPunk, I guess the actual CryptoPunk sort of community. I love listening to Nick Szabo. I love listening to Adam Back. And more recently, I really enjoy Robert Breedlove. He's got a very different philosophical view of Bitcoin. So I really like to get a complete view, because the CryptoPunk guys, they are very clear about what Bitcoin stands for, and they have I think a pluralistic view of cryptocurrencies. Whereas obviously a lot of the other, what you might call Bitcoin maximalists, they don't really even think about other cryptocurrencies, right? They're all about Bitcoin. So I like to get that sort of pluralistic view. I really enjoy listening to Vitalik Buterin. I think he's very underrated and gets a lot of flack, with Ethereum. But when you really listen to him speak, you can see he's genuinely also clear that he's making mistakes, and Ethereum is really young in its journey, and it owes a lot of that to Bitcoin. And he was somebody who was very also in his early days trying to really think about how to take Bitcoin as a base layer and build applications on top of it. So yeah, try and get a really diverse, pluralistic sort of view of opinions from all people.
Which is quite good. So you missed saying that I also written I write a newsletter, my little sales pitch around the topic. I wrote a piece of paper which may not be that interesting, but tries to summarize some of my thinking. And for those who are watching who have not read it, talks about Bitcoin price, value, and some interesting stuff. But I think the way Rohit laid it out, I think we're all on a journey on this together to try and figure out what really makes sense, right? I think all of us are trying to figure out who are the people we want to listen to, which opinions make sense. Nobody here has a crystal ball to say, this is what will happen to Bitcoin, this is what will happen to its price. But, I think across what we see, it's almost an adage to say, if it's not getting destroyed despite various attempts by various players, then there must be something, right? And it kind of begs you to spend time to understand it. I think to me, the most interesting thing was I read this, actually I heard this opinion piece from Balaji, who,
I forgot his name. Yeah, Balaji, sure. Yeah.
I was hoping Rohit would say that as the first name, but he didn't. And I was like, okay.
He wrote a brilliant piece around why India should buy Bitcoin, right? It's a fascinating piece he wrote.
I know.
But
we drank 2 bottles down on that day when we spoke about it, which is good. But it's a bit around. Actually, he did another interesting one where he spoke about what are some of the risks that he sees around Bitcoin. And one of them, and this was like maybe a year or 2 years back, one of them was around what if China shuts down Bitcoin. And his whole argument there was that because processing will move forward into other regions, it will survive or whatever. So it's very interesting to play out. I think while people see this as, oh my God, the market crashed in May, I actually see this as an interesting test of a technology or a platform which says, despite having the most processing in China, as the market shut it down, processing very seamlessly moved to other parts of the world. When the processing didn't move and the hash rates fell, and for anybody listening, hash rate is, you know, the mining complexity that is needed to mine Bitcoin. As you have less people processing Bitcoin, hash rates fell. Rewards adjusted, and nothing went wrong. Like, it's not like there was an intervention by a state government or anybody else. The system just worked. And what that does is, between clean energy challenges and some of the other challenges around China, nothing happened to Bitcoin. It's still holding fine. Yes, price dropped. Yes, some people lost money, but it found its level and it kind of started moving from there. So it's been an interesting piece, the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's fascinating to bring this point, and I think it's important that I wanted to bring this when you ask about whose opinion matters to you. It is very interesting that when I speak to a lot of, and we have a network of people, right? When I speak to a lot of elite, I would say execs, many of whom have been our bosses at some point in time in our lives, they don't understand Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. And I always used to ask myself, like, these guys are super smart, right? I mean, you and I have worked with a lot of them, and I'm like, they're so smart. Why don't they understand this, right? Is there something I'm missing here? Like, these guys, if they spend like a few hours, they will really get it. And, they're the ones who can run with it. How do I know that? I remember, like, when I had the chat with you for the very first time, I knew once you get it, you're the kind of person who will just go down the rabbit hole, and here we are. Now, even with, on a part.
Exactly. Here we are. That's true.
But a point I think I want to make, Saurav, is the reason I think why it gets dismissed. It doesn't get dismissed by people who don't understand it. It gets dismissed by people who don't want to understand it. And the reason is, when you think of it, and you and I have been in the corporate world enough, that these people have made a successful living navigating through what works today.
Yeah.
There's no need for them to change it. And, we call it jugaad, we call it, just being able to figure out the system. And I have navigated through a system that now I am the king of the system and it works for me. Why do I even need to change this? I made enough wealth navigating through the system. And more importantly, I put myself in a position where I'm almost indispensable. So I think that's where, the adoption has not been what it is, because these people are like super smart, and because the system is working in their favor today, they don't see the need for it unless they come out of it and say, you know what, actually, I don't want to be part of that system, even though I'm successful in that, in that system.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. And I think, the challenge is a lot of people, especially in the financial services sector, an easier answer is to do nothing and not change, right? And it's interesting when you look at how a technology this disruptive, this amazing, and to me, I'm talking Bitcoin, I'm talking blockchain, I'm talking all of these things, is so underappreciated and understood by some of the smartest people, like you said, that we respect as well. But I think that's part of this journey. I think what we want to try and do through this podcast, through the other content, is actually create a voice for our content and our thoughts, where we can actually share that with people. Because I genuinely think what Bitcoin has built, we will look back in 10, 20, 30, 40 years and say, oh my God, that was really amazing, right? And like, every aspect of how you analyze it, you realize the uniqueness, right? The uniqueness around that hash rates will adjust, or difficulty of mining will adjust depending on processing power, which means, by setting a block size as 10 minutes, what do you achieve, right? Or, to have a deflationary policy that every 4 years, the reward will drop. I think clearly, I don't think Bitcoin was built by consensus in a corporate organization. If it had been, it wouldn't have looked the same. But it's quite amazing to see it evolve and grow over time.
When you take any technological innovation, and when you look back at what we were doing before that technology innovation, you'll probably have a really good laugh of it. When you think about even email, right? Before we sent an email, we used to actually write letters, and there used to be a plane that used to take these paper letters elsewhere and deliver it. When you think of it right now, you might be like, okay. I mean, I can now send an email or I can communicate through someone through an instant message, right? The technology innovation really makes that previous process, as much as it's still probably romantic to write letters, it makes that process look really inefficient, right? And unimaginable. I was just listening the other time where they said that before they started using, kerosene to light up the homes, the only way you could light up, how they used to actually light up homes is they used to go hunting for whales and then kill the whales and take the fat, and then they used to make candles, and that's how they used to light up the homes. Now when you think of it, you're like, okay. I mean, there's some innovation that happened. So every innovation, whether it was electricity, whether it's internet, I'm sure somebody dismissed it saying, like, I'm just happy what I'm doing. How is this going to disrupt human civilization and change how we are interacting with each other?
The reason I'm smiling is, so I did a few like presentations, and that's exactly what I covered, to say the internet actually enabled you to digitize text, voice, and image, and drop it on a TCP/IP layer,
Yeah.
and it will pop up anywhere in the world, right? And like you said before that, a letter would have to go from, like, imagine somebody would carry it.
Yeah.
Let me actually pull up the slide. It's like super funny, because most people underappreciate innovation, especially in the short term, right? Like, so if you see this slide, I don't know if you can see it, but basically you had a physical letter that somebody carried from somewhere, and like took it by land, by sea, by something, and actually got it over. And then you had a fax machine, and it was like the best thing after sliced bread, right? But then you now have a phone that you can just take a picture and move it over. And I know you're talking Bitcoin, but even if you look at blockchain technologies, they are looking to virtualize like physical and digital assets, and create scarcity across this. So it's just amazing how in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, all of these discussions have changed so radically.
Yeah. I think I mean, you're absolutely right. Internet completely digitized all forms of information, but what it couldn't solve for was being able to transfer that information and value with provable ownership, which it
Yeah.
never could do. That's what blockchain solved for. With blockchain, now you can transfer information and value with provable ownership, and you don't have to trust a central or a centralized, sort of authority. And that is the fascinating innovation, because that means we are now going into the next space of technology innovation, where any asset that can be digitized and where you need to prove ownership, you can now transfer that value through space and time. And that's the innovation that blockchain brings in.
So that brings me to my next question. Now that we know blockchain is amazing, it's awesome, the biggest question I get asked nowadays is, but Bitcoin is environmentally bad. It is the electric power consumption of, a country, whatever. How do you approach a discussion like that in a party?
So I think, sort of, again, you know me well enough that I'm not as fast as you are with these things. So I'm generally, when somebody makes a statement like that, I usually won't comment first. Obviously, the person who made a statement and headlines was Elon, so everybody takes that seriously. So when he said, Tesla won't accept Bitcoins, and he has concerns about the energy consumption of Bitcoin, everybody panicked. I mean, especially the Bitcoin community, they were very upset and so on. So I spent some time, actually, I said, okay, let's try and understand this. So my first starting point was, okay, how does even the energy market and energy consumption works? Like, I have a refrigerator at home. How much energy does it consume in a day and in a year? I started first with that. And, a good thing is all of this information is available now, right? So I actually spent some time and said, okay, my refrigerator consumes about 700 kilowatt per hour in a year, and it costs about 150 per year. And then I did the math, and I checked how many refrigerators roughly are there in the world. There are about 1.4 billion. So I said, okay, this is the amount it's about you could say terawatt per hour energy consumption that's being used. And of course, refrigeration brings utility, and we know what the utility is. Then I said, okay, when someone makes a statement and says Bitcoin is actually consuming a lot of energy, no one actually said how much energy it's consuming. Like, that didn't make the headlines. So then I said, okay, how much energy does it consume? And as I was trying to get that information, there's a really nice paper, and Michael Saylor is part of that Bitcoin Mining Foundation. So they publish data around Bitcoin. So they have a paper that's come out where it shows that Bitcoin mining, it basically consumes, I think about, if I remember, about 180 odd terawatts per hour, and
Mhm.
that is 0.1% of total energy in the world.
Mhm.
0.1%. And then there's another really nice podcast. It's called What Bitcoin Did It. And there's an interview with this guy who's a VP at Grid. His name beats me, but we can send the link. And he talks about how the energy market works because he runs the Bitcoin mining operation. 30% of all energy is wasted in the world.
Yeah.
And even if you take Bitcoin's energy consumption as a percentage of that energy that is just getting wasted, it's less than 1%. And then when you say, okay, so it doesn't seem like, okay, you can take anything and say it's using energy as much as the small country, right? You can even compare it to a refrigerator, and you might say it's using more energy than all the refrigerators in the world, and that may be a good argument because refrigeration comes with some utility, and you may argue it. But then when you think about actual, even how much of it is renewable energy, the mix of renewable energy in Bitcoin is the highest compared to any market. It's 56%.
Yeah.
So then you ask yourself, wait, the only narrative I heard was Bitcoin is using a lot of energy. And I think that you can look at it two ways. One, Bitcoin community needs a PR. They need a better PR spokesperson because they obviously don't have one, and that's, I guess, comes with the decentralization. But the second thing is that the scary part, and it is that the narrative. When you hear any narrative, you need to first ask yourself who's pushing that narrative. What's the incentive behind that narrative? And obviously if it is a political narrative, then it is going to catch fire, and everybody is going to essentially just read that headline and make their assessments of selling Bitcoin, or say, you know what, I'm going to ban Bitcoin, or whatever it is.
Yeah. So let me unpack a few of those items, right? I think I agree with you. There is very little reference check to what happens to energy that goes to waste. And for those who haven't looked at it, I think an interesting fact is energy, unlike your email, cannot be transmitted across the world. It must be consumed very close to production, or it goes to waste. Similar for natural gas, actually. There is enough whatever outlets which are burning natural gas just because they can't do anything about it and so forth. So I think that's one big construct. I think ARC and Catherine Woods and everybody have put some papers out there as well, or have worked on this with Square and everybody, to say, interestingly, a lot of renewable energy could become viable because it could be used for Bitcoin mining, and thus
Absolutely.
like create a whole kind of industry and construct around it. And I think the last part of what you said was like, eventually, and actually Michael Saylor said it quite well in I think his last Bitcoin conference, that it's the most optimal utilization of people capital, tech capital, and
Yep.
energy capital, which is
Yep.
flowing naturally from any place which has inefficiency to another place which is like efficient, right? Like, so if we notice, I'm sure there'll be enough studies which come out around it, but like when China shut it down, they were container loads of shipment which were air flown, not even on the ship, like air flown, of the mining rigs from China to the US, or to Alaska or somewhere else. And these guys put some very
Yep.
interesting math behind it to say, how much heating do we need, how cold is this environment, how is the energy getting produced, is it wind powered, this, that, and the other. So I think it's a space, like you said, which needs a better PR machinery. And I think over
Yep.
time some of that will come through. How much of that is FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt created by participants who want to steal your
Yep.
Bitcoin because they want to make the price drop, is only to be seen. But yeah, it's you should do your own research on these topics before you jump to conclusions and say this is bad.
Yeah, and the good thing is when you derive anything from first principles, and I think that's what Elon was great at, right? And I think, look, obviously Elon is also a comedian. We know now that he's done the SNL, so you have to take some things he says with a pinch of salt. But look, he is someone who has built an entire company around sustainable energy, right? And I think if you look at the positive spin of it, he has now created this whole topic even for the Bitcoin community to start taking it seriously. So, he may have done it intentionally, unintentionally, you never know what's going on in his head, but at least now that has become a topic that they are going to take seriously if they had not taken it that seriously, right? So I think that is something important. But I think you need to also put everything into perspective, right? If you look at the crypto market or if you look at Bitcoin, I mean, Bitcoin is almost like $1 trillion assets under management, right? It's a $1 trillion almost, give or take. The entire crypto is around $2 trillion, right? So the energy that's being consumed is the cost to secure that network. That's a pretty good, economic outcome you're securing for in terms of energy. Even if you decide to buy that energy in the open market and use it for anything else. So I think that's something you need to put in perspective. And the other perspective is, which is fresh in everybody's mind, is US has just gotten out of Afghanistan. It's obviously they spent $2 trillion in the last 20 years. That's the crypto market. How much capital and wealth it's created is $2 trillion. The same $2 trillion has been spent on war, where everybody believes that 20 years, no positive outcome came out of it. So I think it's important that you put everything into perspective as to, where is the money being spent and what is it being spent for.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think the way I would look at it is the crypto market is a whole different paradigm. To me, it's like if I separate out Bitcoin, and maybe that's a good starter to the next point, right? Like, what do you think about the new kid on block? It's not the new kid anymore, but like Ethereum, which we all saw, and it was Vitalik and their thinking, and the whole idea of, could I build a platform that doesn't have a single purpose utility but can allow you to build apps just like the iOS App Store allows you to build apps? Could I build apps on the blockchain that can serve multiple purposes and become like an iPhone, right? Like on blockchain.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on Ethereum and where that's going and how that could play out?
So I when people generally ask me, difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I try and obviously simplify it as much as I can so that I can understand it first. For me, Bitcoin is in my head, it's digital gold. So physical gold digitized, and now you have a secure network where you can actually send that to each other. That's what it is standing for. But when I look at what Ethereum is actually trying to do, is it's almost trying to now build a decentralized version of an iOS or an Android or an AWS. Because today, when you think about it, all of these are platforms on which multiple applications are being built across different industries and solving problems, right? That's the app economy. Obviously, Amazon provides the infrastructure, which is the AWS. And what Ethereum is essentially now trying to become is the next AWS, the next iOS, and the next Android that just allows anybody in a decentralized way to build applications. And the foundational layer has obviously been smart contracts, which is essentially they've taken any piece of contract and codified it. And that's how the blockchain technology for Ethereum is different, that what gets added to the block is not data, but actually a smart contract or a code that can run by itself like a vending machine. So I think in that sense, Ethereum is exciting because it is almost trying to become what I might even say the next Apple and Amazon of how we may actually start consuming applications, and the cases are abundant. It can go after any industry where there is a middleman and essentially disrupt it. It can be gaming, obviously DeFi, financial industry is ripe for that. And I think that for me is super exciting, but it's still very early in that journey, I think. I mean, it's been about 10 odd years, close to 10 years, very early in that stage, eight years, I guess. And these are very hard problems to solve. I mean, if you're taking on the entire financial industry, you're trying to actually, for all purposes, replace or displace the Apple and the Amazons of the world. That's going to take time, which is why I'm excited, but I know that it's not going to happen overnight, and we need to be patient with Ethereum. Whereas Bitcoin is very elemental. It had one use case, it got it right, And it's doing that now. It's not doing anything else. It's just sitting there. It's a store of value. It's secured, and to a large extent, it's no longer an experiment. Ethereum is still an experiment, and it's exciting. If it's successful, we'll really benefit a lot out of it.
Interesting. So now the next question is only for entertainment and not for investment advice. Like everything else, how can you have a discussion about Bitcoin and not have a price prediction? So what would your price prediction be in 12 months, 5 years, and 10 years?
Okay, I'm going to give you a slightly long-winded answer for this, because when I was getting into Bitcoin, a lot of people asked me.
I just want an answer, right?
I know, but I don't want to give you I'm not going to give you an easy answer here, because you're just going to move on to the next question or going to close this saying thank you very much. That's all we wanted to hear from you. So I was asking myself, actually, am I too late in Bitcoin? I couldn't afford one. And then I was like, wait, maybe I'm already too late in it. But when you think about Bitcoin, we were just talking about, right? It's a $1 trillion market cap. Gold is $10 trillion. So if you looked at what is the market opportunity, you can say it's 10% there, right?
Yep.
And we know that there are only 21 million Bitcoins that's going to be mined. And we're 18.9, close to 19 million out there. So if Bitcoin, if you believe that if it's 10% of gold and you believe it will become gold and will have the same market cap, then it should be a $10 trillion market cap. And if there are 21 million Bitcoins that are going to be actually mined, then the Bitcoin price should be $500,000, give or take. So in my head, the time horizon is, given it has hit 1 trillion or close to hitting 1 trillion, give or take, if it becomes gold, and whether that's a 3-5 year time horizon, the price of Bitcoin should be $500,000. Unless somebody changes the protocol, or somebody has figured out quantum mechanics where they crack shard, the entire shard cryptography, and the Bitcoin is no longer secure, right? But otherwise, logically, it should get to $500,000 either in 3 to 5 years. Is what I'm just purely looking at where the market cap is right now.
Interesting. So there are some who feel that it should go anything between $100,000 to $250,000 in this bull run, which could be as small as 6 months to.
I still believe the energy narrative, as well as obviously the biggest country has banned mining, and all of that will slow the adoption, which is why I feel that these things are in many ways going to slow that process a bit. But without these things, I am totally with you. I would have also asked myself, why can't it reach by end of the year? Why can't it just have a bull run? But I think these things need to be taken a bit seriously now, because there is a strong narrative around both these things that are brewing.
Awesome. Okay, so as we look to kind of wrap up some of the questions, it's been an interesting session. If there's somebody who's not invested in Bitcoin, is been watching from the sidelines, what would your advice be on how they could look to participate in what could be an interesting piece of technology in our lifetime?
Look, I think if you just purely take it purely from a monetary asset perspective, it's the best monitoring asset in the last decade. Period. It's beaten everything. So if you're looking at even taking 1% of your portfolio and you want to allocate it to an asset, why wouldn't you want to allocate it to the best performing asset in the last decade? You'll have to ask yourself that, right? And that's just 1% of your portfolio. So I would start first with that. Then I think what is important is, I have personally, and I know Saurav, you do it yourself, is spend, if you want to increase that position from 1% to 10% to 20%, in some cases 100%, then you read as much as you can. If you want to be good at something and have conviction, you need to at least read like 100+ hours of something. Spend 100+ hours reading, really understanding the space before you change that position. And you'll see that as you build that conviction, you'll also understand why you're increasing that position from 1%. But 1% of your portfolio to the best performing asset in the last decade, I think should be a non-argument, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, I think look, I think I seem to have come around the curve on this. There are enough studies to show, that if you had invested X on this Y years back, then it would become this and this. I think there's a broader adoption. As I speak to more people, and this is not retail investors, right? I think the first few waves of adoption came from retail investors. I think there is, of course, within the retail investor, there are whales in the crypto community who hold a lot of Bitcoin. Interestingly, 67 to 70% of all Bitcoin in circulation right now are held by whales, as defined as anybody who has more than 1,000 to 10,000 Bitcoin, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and
handful of people today still control a lot of supply. But I think institutions are getting into this, and they see this as an asset class. Of course, as time goes on, the big boys, which are the institutions, will get in. The whales will move from this asset class to another asset class to do certain other things and whatever. Like, who knows how that will play out? But I
yeah,
think you have to figure out how you use this technology and the investment class to actually factor that into your investment portfolio. And maybe just another advice, this is not us recommending you should buy this. I think you need to figure out for yourself what your life circumstances are, what your investment portfolio is, and if you are unsure, get help from a financial advisor. But I think what we're trying to say is, most organizations now think that there is a place for crypto assets in your portfolio. Do your research, figure out what it means, figure out what it takes for you, and then find the right asset to get into.
absolutely. I mean, look, we're not, as you rightly said, we're not, we're not giving financial advice here, but it's important that we ourselves spend a lot of time researching and spending hours trying to really understand the space. Good news is there's a lot of information, very useful information, good books, good podcasts, but anything and everything you read, make sure that you try and do your own research. Just don't take somebody's word to say that, this is good, so I should just listen to what he or she
Yeah,
says.
this is not a this is going to the moon discussion. I'm
Yeah.
sure you see a lot of those, and if it helps, I have a gif for
I
that.
thought you, I thought you were going to show me Dogecoin. I was
Yeah,
expecting the
no,
Doge.
this is not Bitcoin to the moon. Do your own research. If you look at Rohith, he thinks that this is what Bitcoin is going to be, while Ethereum and everybody's behind it.
I,
Maybe.
I,
Uh,
I, Actually, just on that, Sarah, since you asked me the price question,
yeah,
I have, since I started getting into with the conviction, I
yeah,
have till now never checked the price of Bitcoin.
that's good. The rest of us do.
I know
It's
you
good
do.
to it's good to know
I
what's
mean,
happening.
I can't escape it because obviously all around the Twitter, somebody's talking about it in our conversations. But
Yeah,
another thing which just useful for me is just the dollar cost averaging.
yeah,
Which is how I started it. That I just don't even think about it because my conviction has gone up and up. And look, with everything, there's a bear case. Everything there's a risk. I mean, nobody predicted the pandemic, so you never know what's going to happen. But
yeah.
I think it's important that you look at your own financial circumstances, your own investing strategy, and take a position that you feel you're comfortable with.
Yeah, no, I think, like we said, everybody has to do their own research. We try and do our own. I think what we're looking to do here is create more awareness around the topic. If you have any questions for Rohith, I'll put his personal email address, Twitter, phone number, all his details. You can reach out to him anytime. Don't ping me. No, I'm kidding. But it's I don't know. Any final kind of comments or thoughts, Rohith, as we try and wind this down?
No, I think what sort of you're doing yourself. I mean, this is a lot of investment of time that you're putting in to be able to create content. I really enjoyed your I really enjoyed your article around the cryptocurrencies beyond Bitcoin. Like,
Mhm.
it was also very interesting for me to sort of read and understand that there's more like there are all these other cryptocurrencies that you should also consider. I think the investment you're putting in time and effort to do this, to create sort of education and awareness around this very exciting space, is I mean, I personally admire it, and I wish you all the best, and I will continue to follow and support you in any possible way I can.
No, thank you. And I think, look, I've known Rohit for a long time, so we will definitely have him back on a few more sessions. And I think I've been trying to read up more about other currencies and coins, and I think we look to do deep dives into each of those so that we can bring you things like what's Solana or what's Chili's,
Cardano,
what's
yeah.
Cardona, or other coins, and it's our purpose is to try and demystify some of these things and get it to a point where you say, okay, this is interesting, like I can apply this makes sense in my life, and I think that's what we're trying to do here.
Super.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. If you haven't done so, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell icon, the usual YouTube stuff. And, if you haven't, you can read my newsletter as well. All of this stuff is available on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and I don't know, just check the links. I'm sure it's down there somewhere. All right. Take care, guys.
See you. Bye.